to Echoes and Roots. I'm Sabine and I guide you back to nature, your inner wisdom, and our ancestral ways of living in harmony with Mother Earth and the cosmos. Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. And today I'm going to dive a little bit deeper with you into the Cathars, the group that practiced in South France in a region called Languedoc, Occitania, a form of very early Christianity and a form of really original faith, I would say, on earth that really protected and honored the feminine. And I just traveled back from South France, from the region of the Cathars, and with new insights. And it's been my second time that I've been there, and I'm already missing the land. The land is just so sacred and special, and it's been a really beautiful trip, and with a lot of heightened energetic encounters with Mother Earth as well. And there's a lot I want to tell you. So I've done 2 years ago I've already done podcast about the Cathars, but this is really building onto this original podcast. And this is a 2-part series, because when we talk about the Cathars, we also have to talk about Mary Magdalene and Jesus in France. So this is the next podcast that's going to come out, because it's all connected, because the Cathars protected sacred documents from Jesus and Mary Magdalene, our original teachings, our true founder records, our true Bible. And this is some of the treasures that they protected, that the inner circle of the Cathars knew, studied, and kept alive, really, for this information to, when the time is right, to come out to humanity. And the Cathars actually, they were eradicated from earth by the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church launched on this group what's called the Albigensian Crusade. And this crusade, there's killed an estimated at least 1 million Cathar believers. And it started actually in a city called Béziers, where the city was asked to hand out the Cathars, because back at the time the Cathars was a group that split off the Catholic Church, and they really gained a lot of popularity in that region in South France. But they were also actually in other regions. They were also in Italy, they were in Germany, they also went into Spain. But in the region of South France, they really prospered, and they also guarded very sacred land in that region. And so there was kind of, among the population, there was a mix of people who followed still the Catholic Church, or who followed the Cathars. And so in this city of Béziers, the people were asked to just hand out the Cathars, and the people had a very loving and strong connection to the Cathars, and they didn't want to hand them out. And so the Crusaders basically decided to kill everyone, and they killed in a couple of hours 20,000 people. The entire city, burned it down to ashes. And this happened. This didn't just happen on any day. This happened on the 22nd of July, 1209. And the 22nd of July is Mary Magdalene's feast day. And as we know, the Catholic Church does nothing by chance or accident. And this genocide on the Cathars, which was, it was the first crusade. It was the first time that Christians were promised salvation by the Catholic Church for killing other Christians, and it started basically a time of violence in the name of God. And many other crusades that followed after this. But it was also a massacre, a deliberate massacre on the feminine and on the legacy of women like Mary Magdalene and women before Mary Magdalene. And so why did the Catholic Church launch such a genocide? It spanned over more than 20 years. It included really horrible forms of violence. Many Cathars were burned on the stake. The water was poisoned. They were brutally murdered. They were tortured. They digged out people from their graves to burn them. So people who were Cathars, and why did the Catholic Church decide to do this genocide? Now, because the Cathars held knowledge that threatened the Catholic Church in its existence, and that threatened the pillars and the basis upon which the Catholic Church is built. And we need to remember that the Catholic Church is not built on the teachings of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. The Catholic Church is coming from Rome and was created much after Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And for hundreds of years, early Christians were actually persecuted and killed by Rome until Rome decided to make Jesus a figure for themselves and to distort his persona, to write out the persona of Mary Magdalene, to distort the personas around Jesus, and to introduce something that made them a lot of money. And this is something that the Cathars, basically, the Cathars totally denounced the Catholic Church. They said the Catholic Church was a product of evil. And they denounced the creed of the Catholic Church, but also they denounced the story of the crucifixion and the sin and salvation narrative. The Cathars believed that Jesus was a teacher and a prophet, but he did not come to earth to redeem humanity. And there are many stories of mystery around this land of the Cathars, and some really famous stories is in this book, Holy Grail. I haven't read the book. But it's also in the Da Vinci Code. So there's many more modern directions that link the Cathars to the Holy Grail, that link them to important knowledge, important teachings on Jesus and Mary Magdalene. But obviously, and this is something I'm going to talk about in the second podcast episode on Mary Magdalene, obviously they might have had some knowledge around what really happened with Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and what is the true story around the crucifixion and the introduction of the sin and salvation narrative. Now, the true literature of the Cathars was totally destroyed. So everything that I'm presenting to you now is coming from historic sources that are obviously based on what the Catholic Church had to say about them later, but it's also coming on from what I perceived from the land itself, from my own memories as a Cathar, and So I'm trying to present to you an as complete picture of who this group was and what they believed and why they believed and in what they believed. Now, from what we know is that they practiced a really very early form of Christianity. So going back to before Rome created the Catholic Church and the other directions of Christianity. And they denounced the priesthood of the Catholic Church. They basically were among the Cathars. They were just either believers or what they call prophets. And prophets were their types of priests. And the prophets went through a very rigorous process of initiation. And I actually went, there are these initiation caves. And the Cathars really worked very closely with the land. So the land, the setting of all of this story is in the Pyrenees. Now the Pyrenees is extremely ancient mountain range. It goes back to the supercontinent Gondwana. It goes back to Lemurian timelines, and the information stored in the crystals in Lemurian timelines about our true history. And this goes actually into also one of the tasks of Jesus and Mary Magdalene and that entire group at that time, to really translate our true history into written records. And those written records were also kept by the Cathars. But the knowledge originally was stored in crystals after the fall of Lemuria, and when the Atlantean timeline became extremely corrupted. These crystals were taken to really places to inner earth, but the information could by people that really developed our original DNA access or activation of our original DNA. These people could still later on access the knowledge stored in these crystals, especially through the waters. I'm going to talk about the waters are really important in the region. The waters hold so much answers, so much pure codes. And this is something that Mary Magdalene and Jesus very much worked with in that region. So coming back to this information about who we truly are as humans and what is our true DNA and our history and our light body. And so this is information that the inner circle of the Cathars knew about. And in order to be part of the inner circle of the Cathars, there was a big initiation period. And as I said, this was actually quite a big group. When you think about, at least 1 million estimated was killed. So they were widespread throughout the society. They had different roles. The believers, they were part of the noblemen, they were part of the everyday people, but then there was this inner circle. And so in these initiation caves, so I was talking about the land. So the land is very ancient. There are so many sacred sites on the land, and it's it's situated on 2 tectonic plates. And when 2 tectonic plates meet, we get fault lines, and we get this telluric energy that comes up that gives you access really to the core of Earth, also the crystals in the core of Mother Earth. But also it gives you access to really these sacred places where energy is, where the veils are very thin. Energy is heightened. Energy is really potent for healing, potent for communication to the divine, potent for really purifying your own body, cleansing your field, your DNA. And if you want to understand a little bit more about also why later churches, pyramids, etc., temples were built in these specific places, you can join my course, Humanity the Reclamation. I'm really explaining there in detail the science behind our sacred sites on Earth, and also the science behind Mother Earth's light body. Now, or Mother Earth's energetic body. Now, so these caves, they are built in very potent places, and in these caves, the Cathars underwent initiations for multiple years. The inner circle of the Cathars, where they basically engaged in a lot of purification, meditation in dark spaces in these caves. They also engaged in learning actually different crafts, because as a Cathar prophet, and this was really important for them because they really denounced the creed of the Catholic Church. They did not take money for their services, for their kind of church sort of services. So they had to earn their own money. And therefore they learned different crafts to do that. And what was really important among the Cathars actually is that they practiced, and that's why they were so hated by the Catholic Church, they practiced equality between men and women. So women could be prophets, and this was absolutely unheard of in the Catholic Church, where still to this day a woman cannot be a priest. But among the Cathars, they were female priests, and in terms of percentage, quite a lot. So from the official records of the Inquisition, of what the Catholic Church allows us to know, they're saying that there were at least 1/3 of the prophets, of the priests, were female. But this number is highly 50% in truth. And so for the women, the initiations were also happening in their own caves, slightly different, because of the roles they then held within society. But both of them learned basically different, different professions. And two of the professions that we know about that the Cathars held is one, obviously, the profession of a healer. So working with herbs, engaging in healing. The other one is being part of the textile, the weaving industry. And weaving is a very important feminine task. So everything the Cathars did, they upheld, they protected the feminine essence on our planet, and a very important, I'm going to come to this, feminine sacred site there in the Languedoc that holds access to the original template of the Divine Mother and triple solar feminine race. But so weaving is a practice, very meditative practice, but it's also a practice that is really rooted in the divine feminine. And both men and women prophets were engaged in weavings, and unfortunately everything of them was destroyed. But I would really love to see their patterns that they were weaving, because of course this is also about knowledge they had around sacred geometry and patterns that are coming from the universe that bring, because sacred geometry, what does it do? It brings the harmonic patterns of the universe down here to earth. And when you do this, you basically create harmony, you create harmonious energies, healing frequencies here on earth. And this is, I think, also what they incorporated into their fabrics that they have woven. And so then in these initiation caves, they would spend times basically learning these different professions, the knowledge around this. They would obviously also study their sacred scripts and the really old teachings, right, of also Jesus and Mary Magdalene, of our origins, light, I would say body and light body cultivation. They were also, when they were vegetarians. So they engaged in body, physical cultivation of the physical vessel of the soul, and meditation, breathing practices, and also a lot of purification. Purification was very important, has always been so important for us to really come back into our true essence, into our activating our true potential in terms of DNA, so that we can truly embody our higher self. And they would spend multiple years in these different initiation caves, and I've been there, I meditated there, it was incredible. I had a really soul-nourishing experience with a musician that knows about these caves, that takes people there, and he was playing old Occitan songs there. And that was another thing that the Cathars engaged in. I always hear them singing, so they brought down the music of the universe, and they had at the time, and if you're interested in the musical aspect of the Cathars, so there's a really nice castle I'm sure I pronounce this wrong, but it's called Pruvat. And that castle is really focused on the musical aspect of the medieval time at that time. And there's a museum down in the village where you can see the old instruments and you can listen to old Occitan songs. And what you will feel when you listen to these old Occitan songs, that there is secret teachings ingrained in these songs, but also there is the harmony of the universe, the harmony of the spheres is coming back in the melodies, in the notes. And this is so important for us, also for our health, for our connection to the divine mother as well, to the feminine, is this really engaging with this really healing music. And there was actually this musical group called the Troubadours who lived at the same time as the Cathars. And what now historians saying is that the Troubadours encoded into their songs secretly teachings of the Cathars, while not openly being affiliated with them, because otherwise they would have also been persecuted, right? But what is so special about the Troubadours, what they're actually singing about is love. So they're singing a lot about courtship and love. It's really some really beautiful poems and songs, and it also shows the troubadours could be men and women, but especially with the men, they're always singing about like the love they have for the feminine, for the women. And it brings, again, it's another expression of this. What the Cathars protected so much is the reverence, the honoring the feminine, because you need to consider, right, at that time, the main religion, the Catholic Church, literally like was out to destroy the feminine, and to suppress her. And so they were really like so protective of the feminine. And so these troubadours singing about love, and in the songs of troubadours, and also in this, is often also like coming from the standpoint of a man singing about the love to a woman. And you find back this energy of what you also find in a lot of men that really associate closely with the Cathars. They often hold a really beautiful masculine energy that is in a way, strong, protective, has all the masculine traits, but on the other hand, it has this really beautiful connection to their own femininity. When do we have still to this day, right, men who sing about romance in a very beautiful way, Well, they aren't, it's not that common that, maybe it's songs of broken heart, but not in the way of just like really singing about the beauty of a woman, right? So yeah, it's really, really nice music that you find back in Occitania, and it was also practiced by the Cathars back then and enjoyed by the Cathars. And it's a lot of I feel in the music, there's a lot of their essence and their spirit. And yeah. And coming back to their teachings, so they saw the world as this dualistic place where there is basically a good God that created the souls, and there's a bad God that created the Catholic Church and a lot of the suffering on earth, a lot of the material things. So they kind of denounced this whole the creed aspect of the material world, because they were engaged also, as they were part of all levels of society. They were engaged in, obviously also in trade, right? They also held money. So it's not that they denounced money per se, but they denounced what the Catholic Church was doing, basically taking money from people and saying then, well, now you are safe, right? Your sins are forgiven. And then, yeah. And this dualistic idea that there is a good God and there is evil. This is actually a Gnostic teaching, and this I'm explaining this further in Humanity, the Reclamation of my course. There's a whole story behind this, around our universe and around the wars in our universe, and what exactly is this darkness, this evil, and how it has manifested on earth. And really interestingly, the Cathars believed in reincarnation, but they did believe in that the souls can kind of get trapped in this flesh, the world that's created by darkness, by the evil. And your path out of this is basically by cultivating your soul and cultivating knowledge to assert your free will. And this is really interesting because this goes back to another concept that I'm also explaining for the Humanity Direct Reformation, where, and this has to do with the, I call it the false ascension, not false ascension, false reincarnation loop, where, and I believe this is the case, where there are souls that cannot exert or do not exert their, usually when you die, you have free will. Usually when you die, you reunite with your oversoul. And from that standpoint, you're reunited with the oversoul, with oneness, with the 0 point field of God. And from that standpoint, you decide what your next incarnation is going to be like and where you want to go. But there is something happening on planets like Earth and other planets where the soul is forced to come back here into timelines that create a lot of soul fragmentation and continuous suffering on Earth, and continue trauma held in ancestral lineage. And when you think about this, for instance, you know, we always, there's this belief, yeah, but everything is of God. But if you believe that no, there's a kind of a good God and there's really evil, then not everything is really of God. Some things are created by evil. And of course, overall, there is a oneness to everything, right? There is a reason to everything. And I'm also explaining this new Humanity Direct Reformation. There is a true overlying reason and purpose and for everything. But when you look, for instance, at right now at the children starving in Gaza and at their parents witnessing this, you cannot tell me that this was the free choice of that soul to incarnate into this traumatic experience and for soul growth. You can just not tell me that. I'm sorry. I don't believe that. Like, you know, because this doesn't create soul growth. This kind of experience creates soul fragmentation. And they continue to create generational trauma on Earth. And they continue to create violence and suffering. And so I don't believe this is free choice in many ways. And some of the teachings I believe that the Cathars had was basically showing the soul showing the person how to exert your free will on your deathbed, to basically literally then unite, do the normal path, the path that should be happening after death, that you unite with your oversoul, and then from then on you can do whatever you want. Yeah, so that is one of the aspects of the teachings of the Cathars. And I want to come back to the feminine, the equality between women among the Cathars, and also the roles that women held in the society back then. So the Cathars could also kind of really find a lot of supporters in the society back then, because already in the area in Occitania, Languedoc, like women could hold just a lot of independence. Like women had their own properties, you know, women were allowed to be part of guilds, so women were allowed to work. And that was also so important for the feminine prophets and just the female members. I think the Cathar belief gave women an alternative to their path compared to the Catholic Church that was more free. Because a woman could also choose, right? It could choose between marriage, it could choose between being a prophet, and as a prophet, male prophets, I think often, because they underwent this long initiation process, and then actually they didn't have, the Cathars didn't have like a physical church. They walked they wandered from place to place. And then they did, which was their only real sacrament, was the baptism. And they were teaching people knowledge. And so when they walked from place to place, actually what happened there, they walked the sacred pilgrimage lines and the sacred ley lines. And this has to do with what the inner circle of the Cathars was protecting. I need to come back to this. I need to look at my notes, make sure I'm telling you everything here. Because they were protecting some very sacred lands. So the male prophets often, they were pilgrims, they walked on the sacred ley lines, and with that, when we're walking on sacred ley lines, we are literally infusing it. And they cultivated, right, for years, they cultivated their own light within. So they were already carriers of so much purity, so much light, and so much embodiment of the higher self, that when you then walk these sacred ley lines and the old waterways, you literally also infuse the water, the energy back with the essence of God, with the essence also of the feminine, of the Divine Mother, especially if you yourself become a beacon almost of the emanation of the Divine Mother yourself. And then you engage with Mother Nature, which is also, of course, she is the Divine Mother in persona. You bring that, like, you enlarge the energy, right? You put like it's not just protecting the energy, but you bring that energy really back also to the land, and you make sure the energy stays of the land. So this is the male prophets. And for the female prophets, among the Cathars, what is known and what's also resonant to me is they could also wander, be pilgrims, and they were also always traveling in groups. Like, they were not doing it alone. And you also need to consider the back to time, right? It wasn't always safe for a woman to travel by herself anyway. But what the women also had was, they had these places, houses, where they would educate and provide shelter for other women. And so often the female prophets would also be stationary in these houses. And then in these houses, they educated actually girls from a very young age. So there's many documents from the Inquisition, unfortunately, when they were then tortured and inquired by the Catholic Church, where the women especially were telling that already from very young age, they had teachings from other Cathar women, and they were also in these houses. They learned different skills, and they learned the different professions, right? So that women then were equipped to work themselves and earn money, and had basically a different role in society. And you could also see this is really interesting. There was one council where the Cathars were speaking up for themselves in front of the Catholic Church, and some of the women were speaking up, and then the clergy from the Catholic Church was like, this is heresy, how are you allowing your women to speak here publicly? But among the Cathars, this was normal. The women held a prominent role. They also were part of decision making. Many female supporters, if they were not prophets, but they were many female supporters and followers of the Cathars, were women, and women who also had at the time money. They provided shelters. And what you find with the Cathars is it was a very close-knit community. I mean, yes, it was, like, when you think about it, at least 1 million people, a lot, but people really protected them, because for many years of the crusade, this was at least 20 to more, 30, 40 years of a crusade, there were women on the run, men on the run, Cathars who secretly still tried to preach, right? And they were sheltered, they were given housing and shelter by the population of the region, because they were really beloved, because the Cathars were very humble. Their energy, I love so much to go back there, because their energy is so humble and just so pure, and just it's really like they called themselves, they didn't call themselves the Cathars, they called themselves the good people. But it's about standing in front of the divine and being in service to the divine. And they were especially in service to the Divine Mother, to the feminine. They came in service to protect this. And then, of course, that also filtered down in how they treated their own women. And there is among the Cathars, you find many couples that incarnated into this timeline that were already very aligned and were together basically at the Lemurian timeline. And it is very, it was a time where devotion to the original, the true God, right? To the real essence of what life is. So the sacredness, devotion to the sacredness of life, and devotion to the sacredness of the feminine, and with that also to the sacred place of Mother Earth, could really be lived and celebrated also among a couple. And yeah. And so one of the things that the Cathars protected there, so they had profound knowledge of the sacred sites. And as I said, this land goes back. Most of the sites, they also, the ley lines they walked, the sacred sites they visited, is like all sites. Where early, of course, they were like Mary Magdalene, Jesus. Then before that, they were like Celtic, before that Neolithic ancestors. They have skeletons found in that area that are 500,000 years old. Human remains. This is an extremely old area, and for thousands and thousands of years, humans have there honored the land and worked with the sacred waters and the caves and the mountains. And so in the architecture of that land is an ethereal cathedral, and it spans many villages. It's a massive cathedral, and this is something to understand from the light, but the architecture of Mother Earth. So we know the physical, right, architecture of Mother Earth. But then there is the ethereal architecture of Mother Earth, the non-physical. And just like us, she has meridians, she has many chakras, many nodes where ley lines are crossing, powerful spots, right? This is usually where we have churches are. Now there's churches, right, but all times we had Neolithic sites on them. And she has different vortexes, which we also call stargates, etc. So vortex just where basically you can span dimensions, right? This is like stargate sometimes is a very fancy name, but it's also about just spanning dimensions and accessing different layers of dimensions. And she has also, so Mother Earth has, apart from that architecture, when Mother Earth had the full presence of the Divine Mother, and the Divine Mother is you could see it as an embodiment of a dragon consciousness. So at the beginning of the creation of the universe, from the unified field of source, what was created was these energetic sound frequencies, but also energetic, almost like templates. It's not really a being, it's like an energetic template that, and we call it dragon nowadays, but there's also dark dragons, so there's, let's call it solar dragons, and there is this solar dragon consciousness of the mother, the pure feminine, like the benevolent, the one that loves her children, that loves creation. And this template once was part of Mother Earth, and it was severely, you know how you have these stories how like these whatever knights slayed the dragon. This is exactly the story of how the Divine Mother Dragon Consciousness was imprisoned and on Earth. And as part of this, and now she's coming back, and that's also the work that the Cathars and so many other groups did for such a long time, is to bring that consciousness, that energetic template back, so it can filter back into the physical, right? We are also having this movement out of the intense patriarchy. So within that architecture, there are cathedrals where, I almost could say, the Divine Mother, it's like a sacred temple, right? An ethereal temple. And within this sacred ethereal temple, you have the music of creation. And in the case of the Languedoc region, they have this ethereal temple that has the music of the triple goddess. And this music is incredible, and that's why I'm saying the music, then basically the frequency, because music is frequency. The frequency can be then found back in the sacred waters of that region, and it can be found back then also when you connect to this temple, you can then translate this music into physical music notes. And that's why I'm saying the music of the Occitania region, the physical music, right, is so important. But what happened is that sometimes what we did, because we humans, we build physical things, right? So we brought these ethereal temples, and there's many different regions, we brought them down into physical temples. So some of the Gothic cathedrals, think of Chartres, but also, for instance, think of Rosslyn Chapel. They are a physical representation of the ethereal temples, and what these places do, they use sacred geometry. They are placed on power spots, right, on ley lines, on waterways, but they basically are literally like a resonance chamber. They are like a music instrument, and there's instruction, even in Rosslyn, there's instructions exactly which music you should be playing, which tones, to basically get the entire building working as a sound, as a big music instrument, where when you then sit in it, you are bathed in the emanation, the frequency, the music of God Source or the Divine Mother, depending what kind of specific temple that is. But for instance, when you look at Malta, same thing. Like those Neolithic sites, the underground hypogeums, sound temples brought into the physical, where you again have these, because everything in the universe is built based on sound. And what if we go back to Cathar belief, what the real God, the good God, did is he has these sound bands, and from these sound bands, sacredness creates, beauty creates, health creates. And then we have the distorted sound bands, and we have a lot of them on Earth. Basically, that leads to manifestation of illness and suffering, etc. So for us, it's so important to learn again, to connect back to what are these frequencies of, like, for instance, the nurturing mother, the Divine Mother, right? And then to translate this into literally the physical music that we are creating, but also physical buildings, right? So that we can experience when we sit in these buildings, and when we then make music in these buildings, that we can just be bathed in these frequencies. And these frequencies, when you create the physical buildings, and they then create this really massive energetic field. Once they like, let's say the music is playing, there is a massive energetic field created of kilometers and kilometers, that then actually like also ensures that wherever people are living, right, because these are usually not places where people live, these are places for worship or for spiritual ceremonies, but where people are living, that area is always bathed in these healing frequencies. And that's also, for instance, site in the Azores I went to is working like this too. So the Cathars, basically, they knew about this massive ethereal temple there, and they then walked on the ley lines that protect and enforce this ethereal temple with the frequencies, and also they worked with certain sites that are built to basically anchor this physical temple into the physical, so that the place itself can protect these feminine sound frequencies, because the moment these frequencies are leaving Earth is the moment we no longer have a presence of the Divine Mother on Earth. And we had this for eons, where the Divine Mother kind of was in so many places absent. And this also leads to the loss of sacredness of life, and then this amount of warfare and suffering, and it's going on. And the moment we bring back the Divine Mother again, we remember, and we really use these sites for good. We're going to see it much more reflected also in society and in everyday life. And so now, one of the very important pillar of this triple solar feminine frequency there and ethereal cathedral there is Montségur. And Montségur has been a sacred mountain for eons. Montségur, long before already the Cathars and Mary Magdalene came to this land, Montségur Montségur is just Montségur is very special. It is like it is hard to describe in words what Montségur is. But it's such a sacred spot, and Montségur is basically on a, let's say, more spiritual side. Montségur is a vortex, a massive vortex. There is a node in Montségur. We could call it a stargate, and it's a 12-dimensional stargate. And there are not many 12-dimensional stargates on Earth. The only other one I know of, I think there might be a third one because things work in trinities, but it's not being revealed. The other one I know of is Kauai in Hawaii. And both of them, because they go up to the 12th dimension, they link after the 12th dimension is the field of God, it's the field of origin, of source, and this is also the original field of the true divine feminine and mother, the true mother, because the God field comes in the end from the mother, from the feminine, and she's at the base of everything, and so it provides access to this, and this is why Montségur is so sacred. It is just there are not many spots on Earth like this. And so the Cathars ask, I think in 1223 or so, that Montségur was restored, and it then became for 20 years the seat of the inner circle of the Cathars. And the castle that is now on it is not from that time, actually. That was built after. So look at I posted a lot of stories, a lot of pictures from my travels there. Look at my stories, and you will see in the museum down in the village they have reconstructions of how it looked, because back in the time the inner circle of the Cathars, 500 people lived there on the mountain, and there was big different structures on top of the mountain, and this was a really close-knit community, close-knit inner circle. And there is something, it's kind of emotional, but once you are a Cathar, you're always a Cathar in many ways. Like even people I met, there is a recognition among them because, and it's hard for me to describe how and why it is so deep in people also, and why, like, literally I met people and they started crying when we are talking about the Cathars. And it's, it's often souls, it's soul groups that incarnated together again in service to the divine, and especially in service to the Divine Mother. And so it's souls who recognize each other throughout many lifetimes, and the genocide, the sheer eradication of all of the Cathars and their teachings, and also, of course, what happened on Montségur, on such a sacred place. It's and a loss also of souls, like for many then subsequent lifetimes, a loss of souls that had to reassemble, literally, themselves, kind of, soul parts, claim soul parts back. So it's just it's a very special place, and it so in 1244 the castle basically could no longer withstand the Crusaders, and at that time Pierre Roger de Mirepoix, who was together with his wife Philippa, leading and defending. He was the main defender of Montségur for the Cathars. He negotiated a fairly decent treaty where you could, he negotiated time. That was important. He negotiated time, because what happened at that place, the main documents that the Cathars protected, because I said they protected the original, the true Bible of humanity, which is our founder records that Jesus and Mary Magdalene and their group had assembled. They protected that. They protected also the bloodline of Mary Magdalene, the physical bloodline. There's many stories around the Holy Grail, them having had the Holy Grail, and many other secret teachings. They protected those artifacts, important artifacts and documents, and also about like maps with ley lines and sacred places, and these had to be basically brought into safety. And so he negotiated a time, and a group managed to bring these documents, to secretly escape and bring these documents into safety. And then the Cathars were asked to either, denounce their faith or burn at the stake. And the majority of them did not denounce their faith, because how can you denounce what you deeply feel in your heart? And so 200 of them, many women, many important women also burned. And that was together with the massacre, the beginning massacre on Mary Magdalene feast day of 20,000 people. That was a direct repetition of the massacre that ended on the massacre on the feminine at the end of Lemuria. And And some of the important inner circle was also taken into imprisonment to be interrogated about the documents, of course, because the church, well, the inner circle of the church also knew what they were protecting. And they were tortured and killed later. So they weren't even allowed to die at the stake because, of the Inquisition. But this lives in the hearts of many Cathars, former Cathars, and it's there's many people that have a deep connection still to this, to the area, to the land, and to the sacredness of the land, and who come back again and again to this land because they also know that, the knowledge, the light that they were cultivating, and the essence of the feminine was held in the water and is held in the nature and is held in the sacred mountains and the caves like Montségur, and it's held in the music, and and if you feel a deep connection to this group, to the land, then I highly recommend to you to go there, because it will bring back memories and also just important integration for the path now, right? This lifetime, the path forward. That's all I wanted to say in this episode. Thanks so much. It's been longer than I thought. It's also been emotional. It's a very emotional place, and there's a lot of for many people who have a strong connection, it's a very emotional place. It's also because of the community that the people among each other had. It was very much like a very big family. And there were many other timelines where there were older timelines, of course, but like recent timelines where souls from one soul could come together in that way. And I encourage you to also listen to my podcast on Mary Magdalene in this region, because that beautiful feminine, her as a representation, right, of the divine feminine sacred energy and the divine mother and everything is also so present in the land there, and this was so her teachings were so much protected as well by the Cathars. So thanks so much, and also check out my stuff on Instagram, where I posted a lot of videos from there, and you can see pictures and the different places that you can visit if you feel drawn to go there. Okay. With that being said, thanks so much, and I wish you a lovely 2 weeks. Follow me on Instagram for grounded spirituality, ancient wisdom, and nature-based living.